I'm Aisha Sasay for Inside Africa. This week, we go inside the Niger Delta, a region rich in oil, but where most people live in extreme poverty. This disparity is fueling violence, including attacks on oil installations and kidnappings. And as our Christian Purefoy will show us over the next half hour, conditions remain ripe for the violence to continue. Here he is now with our special presentation, Hope and Anger in the Niger Delta.
Nigeria is one of Africa's largest oil producers, and most of that oil comes from this region. But many of the people here complain they haven't seen a cent of the profits. In fact, some of them argue the industry has robbed them of their way of life. Oil spills, for example, which occur routinely here, have poisoned drinking water, devastated vegetation, and destroyed a once thriving fish population. For years now, militants, most famously Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, have been wreaking havoc by attacking oil facilities and their workers. They claim to be fighting for a greater share of oil wealth. Whether or not that's their motive, the violence is more emblematic of widespread anger. And at the root of it, some argue, lies a common practice by oil companies of paying one group in a community to the exclusion of other groups.
A small outpost of resistance against big oil. Guns, these angry young Nigerians say, are the only choice left to make oil companies and the government here in the oil-rich Niger Delta take notice of their demands for development.
No development, lack of work, better education background. Why we have 4 good major multinational oil in our community.
Despite being a major oil hub, the community of Remwekpe has been no investment here, and that the people have been fenced out from over the only source of profit from the oil industry here. Land ownership and the oil company rents paid to whoever owns the land. The deserted buildings, tombstones to the estimated 200 people who have died in the violence.
As the community fought over land ownership, they've destroyed their own homes. The very presence of oil flowing through this area has torn the fabric of this community apart.
The oil companies say they are paying land rents only to the rightful land owners. But local pastor Humphrey Nasirim, working to bring peace to conflict communities like Remwekpe, says neglect by government and oil companies has caused problems across the region.
The oil is flowing. As I'm talking to you now, oil is flowing. From here, it's going to wherever it's supposed to go. They are making their millions. They are making their money, but they don't care about the community. That's a problem of the Niger Delta.
Humphrey took us to see another faction that had been violently forced out of Remwekpe. They say they want peace.
We are not meant to kill ourselves,
but warn the oil companies against continuing to pay money to individual landlords rather than the community as a whole, accusing them of using the tactics of divide and rule.
These oil companies, this multinational company, they should stop intimidating us. Otherwise, this time around, it's not going to be easy with them.
As Nigeria's oil is shared with the world, these young men want to make sure the profits are shared at home.
From boomtown to city, Port Harcourt has certainly seen better days. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at the governor who's trying to turn things around for the regional capital of the Niger Delta, Port Harcourt. And still ahead, a look at the environmental impact of oil. Welcome back to this special edition of Inside Africa. I'm Christian Purefoy, reporting from the Niger Delta. The regional capital, Port Harcourt, was once a bustling city, but for many has fallen into decline, overcome by crime and poverty. But now a new governor wants to reverse that trend.
Charles Godpower has put down his guns and taken up welding. Only 28 years old, he says he was part of a crime wave, holding Nigeria's Rivers State to ransom. The young men at this local rehabilitation center are here with the hope of finding a regular job, but they are the exception among the region's armed youth.
Well, I take a gun because I have to feed myself, I have to take care of myself. I don't have anybody to take care of me. That's why I use that gun to find my money.
The region's youth have turned to kidnapping for large ransoms to support themselves. And oil companies say the crime has forced them to move some operations out of the region. On top of that, Human Rights Watch, the previous government in Rivers State, of wasting tens of millions of dollars on questionable priorities like gifts, new cars and jets, rather than improving infrastructure. Taking us on a tour of the region, the new governor explained the problems he inherited.
Before we came there, it's as if there was no government. But since we came, it's been enforcement of law.
The new governor of Rivers State, Rotimi Amechi, says he has a plan to revitalize this oil-rich region. His idea includes more jobs through government investment in new roads, schools, and 150 new healthcare centers.
The challenge with any hospital is not building it, that's just bricks and mortar, but it's maintaining it and filling it with professional doctors and nurses who can care for patients.
When oil prices were high last year, he says the state's budget exceeded $2 billion. But Amechi warns oil money brings its own challenges.
You know, people just think that because we're oil states, we're that rich. But the needs of people far outweigh the availability of funds. And we cannot just plan to pay when we don't have the money.
Amechi feels another challenge is to gain the trust of the people of Rivers State. Many people here we talk to feel like Godpower and the other youths. They say they've heard government promises and excuses before.
The new government, we are not benefiting anything. We will never see any changes. Everything is keeping going more harder.
Given a choice, Godpower chooses welding for now. He only hopes the opportunity is available when he's finished his training.
Gas flares light up the sky throughout the Niger Delta. Coming up on Inside Africa, why oil companies use them and what they do to the environment. Also ahead, a Niger Delta community that uses non-violence to keep the oil companies out.
The tourism industry.
Making business news in Africa. South African mobile operator Vodacom is extending its reach beyond cell phones. It wrapped up a $700 million purchase of telecommunications firm Gateway, Africa's largest independent provider of satellite and land-based interconnection services. And the Zimbabwean government says it has raised cash withdrawal limits at the country's banks through the 12th of January. The state-run Herald newspaper reports account holders who show December payslips can withdraw an extra $10 billion. It says customers without payslips can withdraw $5 billion. As of October, Zimbabwe reported an official annual inflation rate of 231 million%.
You're watching a special edition of Inside Africa. Welcome back, I'm Christian Purefoy. Gas flaring is a common practice throughout the Niger Delta. After Russia, Nigeria has more gas flares than anywhere else in the world. It is considered a safe way of burning off excess gas typically released during oil production. But it is a terrible effect on the environment and is extremely wasteful.
$1 billion fire. Gas flares here in the oil-rich Niger Delta are burning millions of dollars worth of natural gas every day. And according to scientists and World Bank economists, causing terrible damage to the environment. Local farmer Lucky Amobi complains the flares are causing toxic acid rain that strips the fertility land and pollutes the rivers.
This farm, this land now, the flare has now affected the land. So the crops is not producing well.
The flares burn off natural gas, typically brought up as a byproduct of oil production. The gas can be sold for energy, re-injected into the ground for later use, or the easiest option, burned.
These gas flares are known locally as Ekun Shell, or Shell's fire, and the heat and noise is incredible. But the real damage are from the gases and toxins being burned into the atmosphere.
It's estimated world gas flaring contributes about 1.5% of carbon dioxide emissions. Scientists say CO2 is the greenhouse gas that contributes most to climate change. The Nigerian government has set a series of deadlines to end gas flaring, but so far one has expired without any flaring being stopped. A 2007 report by US government scientists found Nigeria has reduced flaring over the last decade. But still, after Russia, Nigeria has more gas flares than anywhere else in the world. Nigeria's Environmental Rights Action argues oil companies are simply trying to save money, not the environment.
The biggest beneficiaries of gas flaring are the oil companies. There is no debate about that. I know they're just not accountable to our environment. They're just looking basically at their profits.
The largest oil company in the region, Shell, says it has invested more than $3 billion since 2000 to capture gas that was previously flared. It says it's working with the government to eliminate gas flares over the next several years. But every day, Amobi watches the flares burn. The daily market value of the being wasted, worth more than he's ever earned in his life. As he prepares for the new harvest, he warns his way of life is under threat. He complains he has received little help from the oil companies or the government.
No help. We are still suffering, nothing, no help from them. We have complained tired to them, nothing, no assistance.
A small region with a big impact on the global environment. And as the world focuses on climate change, people here are hoping someone will finally put out the fire.
Deforestation is another environmental problem here in the Niger Delta. People here say they are forced to chop down vast swathes of trees for cheap fuel, because ironically, they can't afford petrol or kerosene.
A dying land being scavenged. Here in Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta, Anthony Ido is looking for the cheapest available fuel for cooking, wood. Like many others, he says he simply can't afford petrol or kerosene, so he cuts down mangroves, keeping some for himself and selling the rest. It's bad to exploit the young trees, but I must feed my family, he says. A hungry man is a desperate man. But environmentalists say the need for wood fuel is contributing to the rapid depletion of Nigeria's trees, wreaking havoc on the environment. The Niger Delta is the third largest wetland in the world, supporting many threatened species of primates and birds, as well as millions of people. It is a region that's been under attack by gas flares, oil spills, and now deforestation. In its last report, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimated Nigeria's annual loss of forest was among the top 10 in the world.
The local community here has stripped the entire area bare of any mature wood, forcing people here to make a 3-day journey deep into the creeks to find enough wood to make a profit.
While the people here struggle to find enough wood for fuel, the Niger Delta is exporting millions of barrels of oil. Nigeria is a key oil producer. The government here does subsidize local fuel, but these subsidies have been lowered, so the deforestation continues. Widow and mother of 5, Bura Ngoza, says she can't even afford to buy the wood and must chop her own. Any extra is sold to buy her family food. Like many others here, she complains she has seen no financial benefit from the oil in her land.